that was so beautiful. I want to start at the end of my talk, which is page 4. I believe this is a healing place, and I want to say how much the music and the meditation, how powerful that is. It's very powerful for me, and I believe it is for others as well. So now I'll go back to the beginning. So my title is Exploring the Gifts of Our Emotions. And I said this to one person who rolled their eyes. And I thought, oh, this is good. We need to talk about emotions. This person is Carla McLaren, and she's on YouTube. She's got about 4 or 5 books. This is basically a psychology book, but I believe that it very much touches the realm of spirituality as well. And so right away I have to apologize to the psychologists in the group because I'm sure I'll get some things wrong, and you will please correct me when after I finish during the open mic time. So why do we learn about our emotions? And I found this book in our library, and I had been thinking about emotions because of what we've been going through as a community the last 4 months. So emotions are our first language, and they are totally pre-verbal, and we have never been taught their true value, and we desperately need the expansiveness and that they provide in order for us to live the fullness and the possibilities of our own lives. This is our first language, and we have all been near babies at one time or another, and they are just full of communication, and yet they're very hard to understand. And so it tells us that we have work to do. We all have work to do on just understanding how possible, how we have been compressed in our ability to use nonverbal language. And that's why I love music so much, because so much of music is nonverbal. And yet it combines the verbal, which we totally depend on as well. We depend on the verbal and our nonverbal languages as we go throughout our days. And Carla McLaren was abused at a very young age, and so she never learned how to socialize. She never learned that how to balance that verbal communication with that nonverbal communication. And so her communication with her family and friends was nonverbal most of the time, until she learned at a much later age that she could combine the two. So she became very fluent in emotion speak. in the language of emotions, and she would pick up on people's emotions very, very quickly. And that has been her gift to us. And we use our emotions all the time, and we don't even realize it, that we are in fact depending on them as we go throughout our day constantly. We are communicating with each other at nonverbal levels all the time. And so I thought a little bit about how one of the ways that we got out of balance was that we were taught to suppress certain emotions, especially our negative emotions. And yet each emotion has its value for a full life. We began to blame others for our problems, for our feelings. We learned this. We learned to blame other people for our feelings, and especially our negative feelings, and then we take that opportunity to exonerate ourselves. I was visiting someone in jail for a period of time, and he would speak to me of the other inmates, and he said, this person is innocent, or that person is innocent. And yes, at the bigger level, we are innocent, but we must be accountable for our actions. And so we're all thinking we're innocent, and in the way as we blame others for our problems. I mean, what day goes by that I don't blame somebody for something? I mean, and that's it's easy to do. It's just easy to do. We blame our friends, but not as much as we blame our government. We blame our significant other and the ones we are closest to. But every emotion has a lighter, gentler side and a darker, destructive side. If we ignore our emotions, we miss everything they have to teach us. Our emotions are expressing the truth of who we are. We walk into a room, and if we're feeling really lousy, and we say, "Oh, I'm fine," it sets up resistance within us. It sets up a pattern of resistance. So anger, starting with anger is our protector and defender of our boundaries. This is from this book, The Language of Emotions. Here I am dropping. There's too many pencils on this lectern. What's that? Yeah, okay, Della. So our anger will keep us steady in an emotional storm, and the other side of anger is that it can be extremely destructive, as we have all experienced. And repressed anger weakens our sense of self. And apathy and boredom are the mask for anger when it is unexpressed. So keeping going on, guilt and shame are about restoring integrity, allowing us to atone for our mistakes in our relationships. Isn't that true, though? And it is never inappropriate to say, "You are sorry," to apologize for something. I have to do it quite often. This is also a part of anger when inner boundaries have been broken. Anger is when we use anger when the outer boundaries have been broken. And we use guilt and shame when the inner boundaries have been broken. Hatred includes resentment and contempt. Its gifts are intense awareness and vision. It's a result of a constant threat, and it is part of our fear. And it would never arise except as a threat of losing the way things are, a loss. And I see a lot of hatred in this country these days because of the extreme changes we're going through at the government level. And this is also a part of our fear and our anxiety and worry. These gifts for our fear is focus and clarity, attentiveness. Our fear will protect us from getting into trouble. it teaches you to follow your gut instincts. It can be ignored, but we don't need to. Fear teaches us to move ahead, but always with caution. And we all understand that fear is very, very appropriate at certain times in our lives. So next we move to confusion. Confusion is a mask for fear. And we've all used confusion as a crutch. I mean, I do. Yes, I have to qualify that. I don't know about you, but I do. It's a good time to take time out to really. Confusion can be a time just to stop everything and to restart your inspiration and to recalibrate, reboot, and start over. But it's important to stay with confusion as long as you need to. I believe that if we don't try to suppress it, that it turns into what it needs to. It turns into inspiration. It may take some time, but it turns into it. Jealousy and envy can make us aware of our connection to others, or our sense of security or lack of security. It's an aspect of fear. So it gives us an opportunity. All these negative emotions, given time, morph into more positive emotions. And jealousy and envy can restore our sense of self, love, and gratitude for life. Sadness involves release and rejuvenation. It helps us to let go, and it helps us to get grounded. I find that whenever I need to get grounded, I go into my garden. That is in the summertime. I have to find something else to do in the wintertime. And sadness comes up for me whenever we have a yard sale, because it means that I'm getting rid of stuff that I may want to hang on to for whatever reason. So it's very, very important to allow sadness, to work through sadness. And when we do, it's because sadness can be turned into compulsions. Many of these negative emotions can be turned into compulsions and give us more difficulty than we need. But if we don't deal with our sadness in a way, I believe it can lead to depression, and depression is about stagnation. And a good indication of stagnation is how much stuff do you have? Hugh Prather always used to say, you are as free as the amount of stuff you have. The more stuff you have, the less free you are. And in many respects, I know I'm going to get you all going to your garages and pulling out stuff. I know it. That's my point, yes. And also, so grief is the deep river of your soul. Deep sadness aches for release. And we must always honor profound loss and death. And more positively, happiness and contentment exists for appreciation and recognition and enjoyment and renewal and peace. And so all these emotions must be honored as well. And the dark side of happiness and contentment is laziness or the unwillingness to be challenged. I mean, I just, I know we all challenge ourselves in different ways, and of course, public speaking is the one way, is the most, for me, is the most powerful way I challenge myself. And I keep saying, well, should I stop giving talks at Interfaith? And I go, no, I shouldn't stop giving talks at Interfaith, because it's a profound way for me to challenge myself. It challenges me at so many levels, and allows me to explore the fear aspect of my emotions. So joy includes exhilaration and honoring happiness in others. Its gifts are expansion, radiance, and bliss. And its dark side is the inability to connect with others or to release joy. It's often we just want to hang on to that. So let's move past exploring emotions, because as much as we have emotion, and everyone uses emotion every day to communicate with other people, we are not our emotions. We are spiritual beings. And so ultimately, we have to take all of those emotions and expand and lift them up into a place where we know that there's so much more, that we are so much more. So we have emotions, and I always remember the words from A Course in Miracles. All events are neutral, and I'm not a victim of the world I see. I'm not a victim of what other people think, or even I'm not even a victim of what I think. These words resonate with us because we know we are at choice for the words we use and the thoughts we think and the emotions we feel. And if we were not spiritual beings, we couldn't have these choices. Although we're not our emotions, we are not in control of our emotions. They come, Thich Nhat Hanh says, emotions come and go like the wind and the rain, and my rock is in my breath. So how can we manage our emotions a little better? Hugh Prather, in one of his books, says, I've come to realize I can't control anything. And it's true. We cannot control anything. So honor our emotions, all of our emotions. Honor them in yourself, honor them in others, because they all have insights and gifts. Our emotions are our profound healing mechanism and should be honored as the brilliant messengers they are. Stay present. And it's harder to stay present when the emotions are very difficult and when the emotions are very painful. But I've noticed that when I have the courage to stay present with that emotion, it does change, it transforms. Whatever else I'm bringing to the table, it allows me to transform that emotion. We find a way to look at the bigger picture. And looking at the bigger picture helps us remember that we are not our emotions. We are not our thoughts. We are not our bodies. And remember that in the process of transforming our emotions, we have to remember, we can choose to remember, we have everything inside of us that we need to create the highest vision of ourselves and each other. We have the wisdom, we have the love, and we have the peace in order to create and recreate our own lives. And we should remember that it's good to listen to each other. And it's, I don't know how this happens, but when I'm listening to someone and sharing in their emotion, it's healing for me. So that's part of the reason this place is such a healing place, is because we've come to be able to listen to each other and to know that as we listen, we are being transformed ourselves by that listening process. It's very powerful, and I urge you to remember. I urge you to remember also that there is one inside of us who is listening, that we are never alone. We never have been alone, and we never will be alone. Although because we are individual bodies, we think we are alone. But we just can't get through this without each other. We just can't get through this without each other. So as I was thinking this, when I get an idea, I start thinking about it. So I've been thinking about this talk for weeks and weeks. And one thing I thought of this morning was, let's hear it for muddling through. I just have to, yes. Let's just muddle through. If we can't be perfect, if we can't think of ourselves as perfectly imperfect, that's what muddling through is. Understanding that we are truly perfectly imperfect. That's what muddling through is. And I recommend it. That's my last that's my last point about managing our emotions. So I've already talked about this place being a healing place for me, and I've been here since the beginning. And still, it's not a given that I'll show up. I mean, for me, it's a given I'll show up, but it's not a given for everyone to show up. But I recommend it because it's such a healing place. So I want to finish with this poem by Rumi, which is in this book, which is my favorite poem by Rumi. And she includes it at the beginning of part 2, Embracing Your Emotions. The guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows, who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thoughts, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. And now it's time for